Hi, I'm Owen Fitzpatrick, co-author of the book Memories, Hope is the Question with Dr. Richard Bandler, and co-founder of the Irish Institute of NLP with Brian Colbert. In this particular video, I want to share with you some valuable insights and ideas that I've gained over the last few years in trying to master NLP effectively. Now, I also want to tell you about an upcoming event, an event that I'm very excited about, which is coming up in London towards the end of May, start of June. But to start off with, in this particular video, I want to share with you a number of things connected with the mastery of NLP. First of all, I want to talk about the difference between well-formed outcomes from an NLP perspective and some of the SMART goals, which is a goal-setting process used quite a lot in terms of coaching. What makes NLP stand out differently to a lot of the other goal-setting techniques out there, and why is it so effective? I also want to talk to you about the two main functions of timelines. You know, there's a lot of times where people spend a massive amount of effort trying to make timelines very complicated and trying to create an entire field from it. But actually, using timelines is quite simple, quite easy to do, and I want to share with you what the two main things that you can do with timelines really are. And then finally, I want to explore with you the different things you can do with strategies. So just to give you an understanding into what are the things that you can use strategies for, and what are the functions that you can start to apply with strategies that will allow you to be able to get more out of that particular aspect of NLP. To start off with, let's talk about well-formed outcomes and well-formed directions, as Richard Bandler would talk about, versus SMART goals. SMART goals is one of the processes for setting goals that you'll hear about in terms of coaching, or you'll hear about in personal or professional development. Basically means specific, measurable, achievable, results-orientated, or realistic, and then timely, depending on the way you interpret it. Now, one of the primary differences between well-formed outcomes or well-formed directions and SMART goals is that SMART goals focus on realistic. Usually the "or" will refer to realistic goals. But from an NLP perspective, we realize that in the past, many people have achieved amazing goals that weren't necessarily realistic. In fact, we'd suggest that sometimes whenever you're trying to get more excited about a particular goal or get more excited about a particular dream, it shouldn't be realistic. It should be something that's a little bit unrealistic, because some of the most amazing achievements that were ever performed or ever done were done because people chose to believe what wasn't necessarily realistic at the time. So again, with NLP, we're not talking about realistic. We are, however, talking about something that is under your control. Well-formed outcomes tend to be positive, specific, sensory-based, ecological, and under your control. So under your control means that you know that you have the ability to control achieving that outcome. Under your influence is something else. It's whenever you know that you can't fully control it, but at least it's under your influence. Whenever you're trying to form a goal in terms of in a well-formed way from an NLP perspective, you need to make sure that it's something that you have at least a massive amount of influence over. The second difference between SMART goals and well-formed outcomes is that SMART goals often will talk about measuring, but they won't necessarily talk about the senses in terms of the impact of what you see, what you hear, what you feel. So with NLP, we look at how will you know that you've achieved it? What will you be able to see, hear, and feel? Now, by activating the senses like that, not just creating a sort of an external measurement system, but actually activating the senses, it's more likely when the person processes it in their mind, they're more likely to be fully emotionally connected to it. Because the more senses you use, the more emotions you will feel in relation to that particular goal. So by getting the person to think, well, what will you see when you've achieved it? What will you hear? What will you feel when you've achieved it? It makes the person much more fully engaged and associated with what they truly feel emotionally about achieving the goal, which of course makes them feel much more motivated. And then the final thing that is different in many ways between well-formed goals or well-formed outcomes and SMART goals is that when we talk about well-formed outcomes or well-formed goals, we're also talking about the importance of ensuring that you're making whatever it is that you do what we call ecological. That means we're paying attention to what it will happen if you do it, what won't happen if you do it, what will happen if you don't do it, what won't happen if you don't do it. In other words, what are the benefits and the consequences of achieving those goals? What is it that will happen, or what will it lead to in terms of the short term or the long term? How will it affect you, your family, the rest of the world? Once you start to see the goal in the wider frame, it gets you to understand something very important, and that is every single minute you spend achieving one goal or an outcome is time you're not spending doing something else. So often when you bring a goal through the well-formed outcome process, sometimes it will actually test the goal enough that it'll get you to realize that it is in fact not something that you're prepared to go after. It's not worth the effort. So that question, is it worth it, is something, again, that's important. So those are three key distinctions. It's not that SMART goals aren't a good way or a better way than just randomly setting goals, but it's that when you create well-formed outcomes instead of SMART goals, you also have the added advantage of making sure that from the first perspective at least, it's not necessarily about being realistic. Second of all, it ensures that you're activating the senses. And third of all, it means that you're testing, is it really worth it in the grander scheme of things? So it's a much more thorough, in my opinion, a much more effective way of setting goals. Also, then you've got a little distinction in terms of NLP, which is the difference between well-formed outcomes and well-formed directions, as Richard Bandler would say. And it's not just about achieving a goal, Richard says, it's about being able to move in a particular direction. And that means starting to notice that you're always starting to get better and better, because sometimes when people achieve a goal, that's it. I mean, you can lose a certain amount of weight, but once you've gotten there, you can always put the weight back on. But if you're always going in a direction, it means you're continuously working and improving in that particular way. So, with regards to timelines, the two different functions of timelines are ridiculously simple. Timelines enable you to be able to do two things: to be able to feel better about the past, present, and future, and allow you to think more clearly or more effectively or more usefully about the past, present, or future. So with regards to feeling better, really a lot of timeline techniques involve you using anchoring, plain and simple. What you will do is you'll access a resource from either the past, present, or the future. And a resource, by a resource I mean a really good feeling, a feeling of confidence, a feeling of power, a feeling of being in your peak state, a feeling of playfulness, a feeling of relaxation, a feeling of humor. And you'll access that, you'll anchor it, and then you'll imagine yourself going back to before a negative event and walking through it. Or you'll imagine yourself going into the future and handling a situation with this newfound sense of confidence. So again, it's taking the anchors of the positive feelings and anchoring them, and then bringing that resource state or that anchor into the different situations, again, in your perception of the past, present, and future very, very effectively. The second thing then is about how timelines allow you to think more effectively about the past, present, and future. So we know that typically people sort in time or through time. I mean, there's a lot of different distinctions, and there's things like between time, but primarily people will talk about in time, which is you represent the past behind you, you represent the present inside of you, and you represent the future in front of you. And then some people, whenever they're talking about how they represent time, they might say, I represent through time, which means that they represent the past to your left, the present in front of you, and the future to your right. Now, depending on how you organize time inside your mind, there's different advantages. If you organize the past to your left, for example, then what will happen as a result of that is it's more likely or easier for you to be able to recollect and to be able to remember certain experiences. Whereas if you represent the past behind you, it's probably more likely that you find it easier to put the past behind you and move on. In other words, that you're not always focused or thinking about the past event. So there's different things like being able to take the learnings from the past and representing that to your left, and then taking the negative experience itself and representing that behind you. By simply playing around and ensuring that you're orchestrating or organizing your timeline in such a way that it's conducive to you achieving your goals, that it's conducive to you thinking in more useful ways and acting in more effective ways, it enables you to be at your best. And again, that's something you can learn and go in much more depth into. But primarily, there's only two things that timelines are about: helping you feel better about the past, present, and future, and help you to think more usefully in terms of the past, present, and future. And then finally, one of the things that I think that a lot of people ask me quite a lot is, what's the deal with strategies? So what are strategies all about? How do you use strategies in terms of NLP? What are the main things you can do with strategies? Well, there's 5 key things that you can do with strategies. First of all, there's eliciting strategies. Eliciting strategies simply mean, first of all, what is a strategy? A strategy is what is it that you do inside your head in order to achieve a particular result. So you've got strategies for motivating yourself, strategies for getting out of bed in the morning, strategies for deciding what to buy, strategies for learning something, strategies for remembering something, strategies for all the different things that you do inside your head. That's what we mean by strategies in terms of NLP. Now, when we talk about the different things you can do with strategies, and we talk about eliciting strategies, what we're really talking about is your ability to find out what someone else is doing, or even to find out what you're doing when you're getting a result. So say, for example, you're able to wake up and get out of bed in the morning quite easily, and I want to be able to learn to do that. I can elicit that strategy from you, And by finding out what you do inside your head, in other words, the images you make, the way you talk to yourself, the feelings you create, and the sequence in which you do that, the more I know about that, the easier it is for me to then use that and apply it to be able to get effective results myself. Now, I can also elicit something from myself. So, for example, let's say I don't feel too confident in front of small groups, but I'm very confident as a public speaker. I can find out or elicit my strategy of confidence in the public speaking, and then I can use that the next time I go into speaking with a smaller group. So you can actually elicit or find out how is it that you think about something that you're good at, find out what you do, and then apply it in a different area. So eliciting strategies is finding out what another person does. Then we've got the ability you have to be able to collapse strategies. Collapsing strategies means taking a strategy that isn't very effective. In other words, if you have a strategy for being scared of something, or a strategy for feeling bad, or a strategy for stressing yourself, or a strategy for worry, the more that you be aware of how you do what you do when you worry, when you stress, when you get scared, the more you're aware of that, the more easy it is for you to start to collapse that. So you can start to move around pieces of the strategy, exaggerate the strategy, blow it out of proportion. You can start adding different feelings into this strategy. So what you're doing is you're playing or messing with the particular negative strategy. So when you try to actually go back, or when the automatic worries start to go into that strategy, they stop and they don't work the same way, because again, you've messed up or you've collapsed that strategy. Again, it's something that you can go into much more depth on. Then we've got your ability to be able to change strategies. And chaining strategies mean taking one strategy and connecting it to another. So let's say, for example, you want to be able to not only feel confident when you're on stage, but you also want to be paying very good attention to the audience. So let's say reading people's strategy, or reading an audience or winning over an audience is something you want to do, but only after you feel confident. What you could do is you could start to take a confidence strategy and start to chain on or link to that confidence strategy, that strategy of being able to understand or read an audience clearly. So the result of one strategy becomes the trigger of the next strategy. And by doing that, you literally can create, in reality, most of the most complex skills are built generally like that. When we talk about modeling, although modeling also involves a lot of things to do with beliefs and identity and, capabilities, et cetera, a large part of the strategic part of modeling is a number of different strategies working together, because something as complicated as learning a new language, for example, isn't just about your ability to speak words. It's your ability to remember words, your ability to deal with confidence issues whenever you're in a new country, your ability to bounce back whenever you've performed badly, your ability to be able to learn words on the spot, your ability to be able to pronounce words. There's a number of different strategies. So when you chain those strategies together, you're much more likely to get a very, very effective result. Then we've got optimizing strategies. That means making a strategy that is already good or already working well, making it even better, making it more elegant so you reduce the amount of steps, or making it have an added positive feeling. Again, optimizing a strategy is taking a strategy that works and making it work even more effectively. And then finally, there's installing strategies. And that means whenever you're communicating with someone else, whenever you're teaching someone else, not just teaching them the content from a content point of view, and not just teaching them simply the steps physically of how they learn something, but actually getting them to have the mental strategies that they need to be able to do more effective work there. So instead of me just teaching, for example, if we take learning vocabulary in a foreign language, instead of just me telling people what the vocabulary is, I'm actually sharing with them how to think about the vocabulary so they're able to remember that vocabulary in the future. I'm sharing with them strategies for memory, or strategies for remembering what is it that they need to know. And by doing that, the person is much more likely to be able to do far better and learn a lot more as a result. It's one of the reasons why, the great work with Kate Benson and all the work she's done with teachers makes such a difference to so many people. It's because, again, when you're a teacher using NLP, you're not just teaching, you're actually helping people to learn. And that's something that I think is really a wonderful addition to the education system in terms of the great work that's done out there. So once again, hopefully you found I wanted to throw a lot of content into this video for you. Again, what did we cover? We talked about the difference between well-formed outcomes or well-formed directions and the SMART goals. So primarily the three main distinctions being with regards to SMART goals and well-formed outcomes, that well-formed outcomes don't have to be realistic, because again, what is realistic depends on how optimistic you are in many ways. Well-formed outcomes tend to be focused quite a lot on activating the senses, what will you see, hear, and feel when you've achieved it, and also making sure that the goals are ecological, that they're worth it, that you're thinking through the benefits and the consequences of them. We also talked about, in terms of the differences between well-formed outcomes and well-formed directions, in that well-formed outcomes are about achieving a particular goal, whereas directions are you're always going in a particular direction, which are much more useful for you to be thinking about. Then the next thing we talked about was the importance of making sure that whenever you're trying to understand how to use timelines, there's only two primary things that timelines does. First of all, timelines allow you to feel better about the past, present, or future. And second of all, it allows you to think more usefully in terms of the past, present, and future. And once you understand that, it's far easier to do a lot more easily with using timelines. And then lastly, we talked about strategies and the 5 main things you can do with strategies. First of all, you can elicit strategies, find out how someone does something. You can collapse strategies, which is be able to change or stop a person from engaging in a negative strategy that isn't very effective for them. You can change strategies, so you can connect one strategy with another, so ensuring that people learn more complex ways of doing things. You can optimize strategies, which is again making a strategy that already work even more effectively. And you can install strategies, which allow you to be able to help another person to learn a strategy automatically. So again, there's so many different things that you can do in terms of just the areas of strategies, timelines, and even well-formed outcomes. So obviously there's lots and lots that I could say about all of these different aspects of NLP. And that is why I would love to invite you along to a very special course that I'm doing in London. I'm doing it from the 30th of May to the 2nd of June. It's a 4-day course called NLP Mastery. Now in this 4-day course, I'm going to be teaching everything from advanced skills using the meta model and Milton model of NLP, using sleight of mouth patterns in a particular way or a particular form that I've developed over the years in terms of using language effectively to help people to make changes inside the way they think and the way they feel, and in terms of their beliefs. We'll be talking about values, we'll be talking about advanced use of meta programs, how to identify meta programs another person uses. We'll be talking about the resource states, the 9 different states that you need to be in order to be at your best. We're going to be looking at all the different aspects of NLP from the particular perspective of helping you to master these skills. Now, maybe you've done a practitioner and a master practitioner before, but the truth of the matter is that just doing a few days of learning these particular ideas aren't necessarily all you need in order to be able to master them. I know myself, I've spent many years studying vastly from many different NLP trainers, and always learning something new, but also always practicing the same skills over and over again so I could use them simultaneously. So if you are interested in spending 4 days with me in terms of the NLP Mastery course, it's part of the general NLP Master Practitioner program for teachers that I run along with Kate Benson and some wonderful trainers. But if you are interested in taking the time out to do NLP Mastery with me, it's on from the 30th of May to the 2nd of June 2014 in London. All the information is on the website www.meta-nlp.co.uk. That's www.meta-nlp.co.uk. So I really do hope to see you there. For now, I'm Owen Fitzpatrick. Hope this was of value. Thank you very much for watching.